So the first question that I got was around navigating law school. And I'm not going to say who sent the question because people might be sensitive about the issues. And the question here is, there's two questions. So how do you advise a law student trying to navigate through law school while prepping for the work environment? And then tips and advice for law students in their studies. Say this, like, law is not hard, but there's a lot of volume, right? So you need to, and you can't leave it till the last minute to study. It's all about doing as much of the upfront work and the reading as possible, doing summaries so that by the time you get to exams, you are prepped and you're ready to go. And the worst thing you can do for law school is to study like right at the end, because there's just too much work to get through. So it's more about making sure that you're consistently catching up with your reading, all your cases, summarizing them, and making sure that, you know, you don't get left behind in terms of digesting the work that you have to do. And then tips and advice to give to law students. Okay, that's a tips and advice for studies, and then navigating through law school. So yes, the studies are very important. You need to keep up with your reading. You need to keep up with your work, and it's all about consistency. However, by the time you get to second or third year of law school, and I know it's early, you need to start already thinking about, you know, how you're going to apply for articles, where you're going to be going for articles. A lot of the law schools have, a lot of the firms have VAC programs. So it's important as junior lawyers, as law students, to try and get into the VAC work programs as soon as possible, because then you're already setting yourself up in 2 or 3 years when you want to get into a law firm, to already be familiar with them, to already have done VAC work for them, to be bolstering your CV and to build those relationships. I left my getting into VAC work programs very late. It was literally because I did a 5-year degree. I literally only went on VAC work programs in year 4, which is very late. And that's because I didn't even know that VAC work programs existed. So I think in as much as in law school, you need to focus on your studies and do the volume of the work, you also need to be thinking about, in the next 5 years, or 4 years, I need to be looking for a job. And so do the VAC work programs and also try and get other types of experience, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to be experience in a law firm, like literally even waitressing, because I did a lot of that. Waitressing, working at McDonald's, any sort of, like even working at Mr. Price, or like be working in retail, you learn different skills, right? So if you have those jobs, which you might think are menial, you are actually demonstrating that you can work in a team, you can arrive on time, you are reliable, you can take instructions, and those skills are transferable to your law degree. So just don't be snobbish about the type of jobs you do in university. Work as much as possible while focusing on your studies, and then build those relationships. And even when you're in varsity, and again, you know, I talk about social media a lot, especially LinkedIn. Even if you're like a law student, you need to be building a social media profile. You need to be involved in the Law Students Association. You need to be involved in associations within your university that will sort of give you experience, stuff like Toastmasters, debating. All of those skills are transferable, right? And you need to round out your CV as much as possible while you're in law school, and not just focus on your studies, because you can get A's for all of your subjects and don't have work experience, are not involved in any extracurricular activities, you're not in any leadership positions, and it's going to be hard for you to get into articles. If you have all of that other stuff, and then maybe you're getting like B's or like C's, you can actually wing it and get, you know, great positions within law firms. I don't know if I've generally answered that navigating law school question. I don't know if anyone else has got insights to share, or just, you know, to let some of our law students know, you know, how they navigated some of these issues.
Hi, Rory, can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mantibile.
I just wanted to know, is it advisable for law students while doing their law degree just to work at a law firm? For example, before doing my LLB, I worked at a law firm for 6 months. I know it won't be recognized by the Legal Practice Council, but for me, it was experience.
Amazing. Like, I totally think that is worth doing. It's not, because I think, and this is something I want to instill in everyone, right? So it's not, yes, you know, you have got the prerequisite sort of number of months that you have to be working in articles for you to be admitted. And that's ticking a box for the Law Society, right, for your admission. But you also need to be thinking about experience in terms of the value that it adds to you without necessarily doing it to tick a box. So in as much as that time won't be recognized by, you know, the Legal Practice Council, in terms of for your admission, it's going to be valuable time because you're going to be learning, right? And you're going to be building those relationships. So I think if you can get any experience in a law firm, obviously that's first prize, whether it's even like people taking gap years in between, like last month's mentorship thing with Bainbridge, with David Bainbridge. I mean, David is he's going to go to law school in the US now, right? He's a perfect example of someone he's done brilliant stuff with mooting and mock trials in the US. And he, from high school, and remember in the US, they do like undergrad and then work for a little bit and then go to law school. So a lot of the law students in the US are a bit mature. So they're in their late like 20s, because they've had all of this amazing work experience. And I actually agree with that model, because I think starting law as a 22-year-old, you're not mature enough, but that's how we do it in South Africa. So David is a perfect example of someone who's very heavily involved in the law, but he hasn't even gone to law school. And you know that he's not going to struggle finding work after he finishes his law degree. And I think the JD is like 2 years or something. So definitely it is advisable that if you can get law experience, even if it's from high school, even if in high school, like on Saturdays, your dad has a law firm or whatever, you go and you officially are like, every Saturday I'm going to come, or like shadow a secretary, or whatever it is, any amount of time that you can spend in a law firm is advisable, because you will pick up law-related issues. Even if you go in as a messenger or someone who's doing the photocopying or someone taking notes or secretary, any amount of experience you can get is going to be worthwhile, and it's worth definitely doing. So that's first prize, and I agree with that approach.
Thank you, Rory.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I need to know employment prospects for newly admitted attorneys, like what options are available in the market, and what can they do with their law degree? So there's a lot of things that you can do with your law degree. And again, like I have a long list of like content that I need to put up, and this question comes up often. And what I'm working on is like a free prospectus where you set out like 100 jobs that you can do with your law degree, with like relevant context at the bottom. Like, so for example, if you want to work at the public protector's office, they have a graduate program there. Like you can go to the constitutional court and clerk there. So the prospectus I'm putting together is like a list of professions, like 100 things you can do with your law degree, then a snapshot of like what that entails, and then like relevant links. So for the constitutional court section, for example, the prospectus is going to have a link with the applications for like the constitutional court. But that's like one of the many projects I have to do, because this question comes up a lot. So there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of things you can do as an attorney with your law degree, right? So I always say you need to do your admission. I think first prize is for you to get admitted, because once you get admitted as a lawyer, even if you don't necessarily want to follow the straightforward working in a law firm, or alternatively being an advocate and practicing law, once you have your admission, you know, it is, employers want to do that. And even when you move into corporate, for example, they might not promote you because you're not admitted. In my team, for example, I'm in-house and I do banking and finance work, specifically property finance. And you will find that there's like people who've been in the same position for like 10 years, 15 years before I even got there. But because I'm admitted and I have a master's degree, I'll get promoted ahead, and they're like, you are capped in terms of how far you can go as a lawyer in an alternative profession if you're not admitted. And a lot of the job applications for sort of senior positions, they'll say, yes, you can have your law degree or whatever, but with admission. So admission is definitely first prize, even if you don't think you are necessarily going to follow the traditional route and become a practicing attorney. But once admission is done, then you have a lot of options. So if you can't get articles, because some people can't get articles, right? You can apply for graduate recruitment programs. So all of the big banks have got graduate recruitment programs. Some of the institutional, hi, Silo. We are talking about employment prospects for new attorneys, because that was one of the questions that came through. So all of the banks have got graduate recruitment programs. A lot of the other types of financial institutions. So for example, I know Alexander Forbes has got like a graduate recruitment program where you go through the different departments of the financial institution. And if you like end up at a place where you like, then you end up being retained there. So those are your options. And I'm sure you guys know this, but obviously as a lawyer, you can either go to the bar and become a practicing advocate. And that process is slightly different, obviously, from becoming an attorney. So if you want to focus and specialize in litigation, then you go to the bar route, right? So you would apply to a bar association. So there's the Western Cape one. The different regions have got their bar associations, and then they take you through a training of like a year where you write exams. So you'll be allocated a principal at the specific bar. You write exams, you go through like a lot of advocacy training, and then you will then be admitted as an advocate. But if you want to become a lawyer who doesn't necessarily specialize in litigation, you can still litigate as a lawyer, but the specialists for litigation are advocates. And if you want to become a lawyer and do like more corporate law, labor law, that sort of stuff, then you go through the law firm route, and your articles are going to be 2 years. Again, this is a piece of content. I want to do an infographic with nice arrows and like to show the different stages of the process. So as an attorney, you would do your 2 years of articles, 2 years of articles, and then you would get admitted. And whether you have your admission or not, as I said, you can go into the graduate recruitment program. And what I've seen a lot of people is you can't get articles, do the graduate recruitment program for 2 years. Then during that 2 years, apply to get to articles. Because even if you get admitted, like, there's no set time to say by 25 I have to be admitted, or by 30 I need to be admitted. I saw on LinkedIn the other day, like D, I forgot her name, D something, but she's like this 56-year-old woman who just started articles now, and she's posting some really interesting content on LinkedIn. I'm like, good for you. You don't need to be admitted by a specific age, but there are a lot of things that you can do with your law degree and your admission, right? So the big banks applying for financial institutions, some lawyers are going into like tech startups. You can work for different corporates. So now a lot of companies actually have their own in-house counsel. So yesterday I was on a panel discussion for the SALT, South Africa Legal Technology Network. I was one of the panelists. And I mean, people on the panel, one was the general counsel for Take a Lot. So you can go and work for Take a Lot as a lawyer. And he has like a whole team. He had like 6 lawyers there from Take a Lot. So companies will have lawyers. There was another lawyer from Exigent, and Exigent is a software company that builds like software for lawyers to use, but they also provide alternative legal services. So there's been a lot of new companies that provide alternative legal services that are not necessarily law firms, but they sort of provide flexible working hours for lawyers, where they get in contracts and they staff the contracts based on their pool of lawyers that they have on their books. So alternative legal service providers, there's quite a few in South Africa. I know off the top of my head, Cognia is one, for example, and Exigent is also another one. And then there's obviously your traditional law firms, and your law firms are, you've got your big firms and your medium-sized firms and your smaller law firms. Then there's like stuff like the Constitutional Court, sort of opportunities to go and work like on specific programs and like shadow like other judges or other people within the judiciary. And then there's academia. Academia is also a very good sort of alternative career path, even though in university, you don't get a lot of focus on it, but a lot of like my lawyer contacts are in academia, and that can also be a fulfilling career. I hope I've sort of painted a good picture of the employment prospects for new attorneys. There are a lot. I can't go through all of them. As I'm saying, I'm putting together content that sets out at least 100 alternative legal careers for lawyers. And maybe actually I'm going to try and aim to get that out by maybe middle of November for everyone. Mantebile, you can go ahead. Your hand is up.
Hi, Rory. I just want to know, as a law student fresh out of university, is it advisable for one to go through the advocate route, seeing that we don't have an experience? Or must we go first through the attorney route, build our experience in terms of administration and getting to know each other in the field, and then only then one can go into advocacy? Because I love litigation and I want to become an advocate, but my worry is, who am I, because my potential clients will be firms. Thank you.
That is such a great question, and I love answering this question, and the answer is very clear in my mind. I think it is advisable to first become an attorney. And the reason is exactly what you were saying. You, as an advocate, you get your work from other attorneys, and if they don't know you, they're not going to give you work. And being an advocate is hard. It's like, specializing in something. It's like going from being a doctor to being a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon. You want to have a soft landing into law and litigation, right? By sort of easing into litigation, because what the law firm will give you is exposure to also different types of fields, as opposed to just going in and specializing. You will get access to, for example, to corporate law, commercial law, and you'll be litigating on those aspects, right? So as a litigator, you're not only going to litigate on criminal matters, and that's not where the money is. You are going to be litigating on commercial issues. And if you've never drafted a commercial contract in your life, it's going to be very difficult for you to litigate on that. You might litigate on IP-related issues or be involved in arbitration around IP issues. And if you've never filed a trademark in your life, then you don't have that context. And lawyers who have that long experience will always, be in a better position than someone who doesn't. So I definitely do think that you should not, as a 22-year-old, straight out of varsity, go to the bar and become an advocate, because you will not have the contacts to grow your practice, and you won't have the necessary general experience that would enable you to litigate on a number of matters. So the other thing you might be exposed to in practice is tax. You will litigate on tax, but if you've never worked on tax issues in practice, you won't have that background knowledge. Advocacy is around what you get trained on are the court rules as an advocate, and then you will get trained on advocacy, like standing up and arguing in front of a judge. They're not going to be teaching you company law. They're not going to be teaching you contract. They're not going to be teaching you about loan financing or about tax, right? So especially with the big law firms, you get a general overview, even during articles, right? So you might get 6 months in corporate, 6 months in IP, 6 months in labor law. You will litigate on a lot of labor issues. But if you've never drafted an employment contract, assisted companies with or even unions with applying to, have protected strikes, all of those issues are going to be involved in litigation matters. And you also need to build up the context. So, and this is a very interesting debate in my household, because my husband is actually he's at the Cape Bar now. So he's a pupil. And the other thing, you don't get paid as an advocate. So a lot of advocates work to save up money so that they can have the 1 year of not being paid. So, but my husband worked in banking. He was a banker at Investec, and then he went into politics for a little bit. And so first of all, we saved for the year of him not working. And he has those contacts from somewhere else, right? Because he's 40 and he's going in at the bar now, and he's doing better than people who've been at the bar for 5 years. Let's say people who went to varsity and have been at the bar for 5 years, because he has all of that background experience and he has all of those contacts. He then will do better. And also, again, I want to move you guys away from this idea of saying there's a strict timeline to do something. So you might be a little jealous because your friends are now advocates, straight out of varsity, and they have the title. And then you think, no, this is a longer route, because ultimately, right, the sense I'm getting from you is that you know yourself, you know you want to litigate, you know you want to go to the court, and you might not necessarily, have an interest in doing corporate transactions. And you think you're being left behind because your friends are like advocates with the titles or whatever. But what will happen, and I guarantee that this will happen, is if you would take the longer route and go through a law firm, right? Yes, you might be, then you'll have to come back and start from scratch as like a pupil for a year. But once your year is done, your acceleration is going to be so much faster and you end up doing so much better. And again, I always use Utembeka Ngaitobe as an example. And I've said to you guys, Utembeka gave me my first job and he was my first principal. And Utembeka was a partner at Bowman's before he went to the bar, right? He even went the law firm route and stayed for 7 years, became the youngest partner at Bowman's, and only then did he go. And like literally ever since I met Utembeka, like when I was starting work, he's always known, like he'll say, his aim is to go to the Constitutional Court. Utembeka, that is what he's working towards. He wants to go and become a Constitutional Court judge, and he's known that for the last 15 years. That is why he's doing the stuff that he's doing. But he knew that he, first of all, had to have the contacts within the big law firms. And he needed the groundwork to say, he's worked on commercial issues. He's worked on labor issues. He's drafted labor contracts. He's drafted like political statements for people, or he has like been involved in procurement law and advising, writing legal opinions within a law firms on like the Public Finance Management Act, on governance issues, or he has that ground experience. And then people will be like, yeah, but how does Utembeka make silk in 5 years when it takes, and become a senior advocate, when it takes people 15 years to become a senior advocate? But he's already done the groundwork and is a perfect example of someone whose growth just accelerated because he was patient with himself and he did the groundwork. And people are like, he's this superstar lawyer, and all of a sudden he's like, making silk in 5 years. But I'm like, but he has been patient. Like he literally went to a law firm and he has always known that this is what he wants to do. He made partner. After 7 years, he had the humility to go back. Can you imagine moving from being a partner at one of the big law firms and then going to be a pupil at the bar for 1 year where you're not being paid? You are delivering documents, you are photocopying, you're running around after advocates, you're taking notes. But he had the humility to do that. So when people are like, it's going to be too long, I won't have the humility after being an admitted attorney and working in a law firm for 3 years to go back and become a people advocate. I'm like, guys, Utembeka was a partner, at a big law firm, and he had the humility to do that. And now look at his career. So definitely go through the law firm route and then go back to being an advocate afterwards.
Thank you, Rory.
Sure. The road to admission. So this is another question that's come up a bit. And I think I've already touched on it. So what is again, this is also another piece of content I need to work on. What is the road from, being a law student to finally getting your admission? And as I said, you've got two alternatives in South Africa. You can either go to the bar or you can be admitted attorney and practice within a law firm. For both of them, you need a law degree. So the statutory requirements is you need a 4-year law degree or 5-year degree in South Africa from a South African university that's registered. Once you get that, if you're going to the Cape Bar, then you apply directly to the Cape Bar. They will assess you. Then you will come in as a pupil, depending on the bar that you've applied to. There's different bar associations across South Africa. And they will allocate a pupil for you. That is the person who will be guiding you on your journey. You will get some work, but you can't take paid work during that year. You're training. Your relevant bar association will organize a lot of training for you. You'll get a lot of support, and then you also need to prep exams. So then you will get to a point at the end of that year of your pupillage where you write exams. You write your exams, and then if you do well, then you will get admitted as an advocate. For attorneys, you need to apply to a law firm. you will get admitted to a law firm. You will still get allocated a person that you work with, but you will, in most law firms, you will rotate across different departments. Even though you'll have like one person who's then going to file your papers at the end of your articles, you will rotate in different departments. Your articles are 2 years. And then once you've completed your 2 years of articles, you will write 4 board exams as well. There's additional, and then you will also be going to classes. So I think in your second, like after a couple of months of the start of your article, you will still go, there's additional classes that you need to go to in the evenings, and your law firm will tell you where to go take your classes, additional classes to prepare you for your board exams. Then you write your board exams. Then you will file papers at the relevant high court to be admitted on the court roll. And it's the same thing with advocates. Your pupil, your principal in a law firm or your pupil master as an advocate will help you put together your papers. So you'll file an affidavit, and on it you will attach like your law school certificate confirming you have your LLB. You will attach your attendance for all of the evening lectures that you've attended. Then you will put in like confirmations that you've passed your board exam. So you have to attend your evening classes because there's a register, and I think they say you can't miss less than you need your attendance. You need to at least attend 80% of your classes, and you will get issued with an attendance roll. If you miss any of your classes, you can't get admitted, and then your papers will be filed. You'll have a court date, then you make an appearance in front of a judge who'll look at your papers, and then will stamp and say, you know, welcome to the profession. Then you take an oath, and then you get admitted to the profession. So roughly that is the process of admission. I will put together a more comprehensive, nice infographic setting out the process. Okay. I'm looking at the time. Okay, so this is another question that I got. And this is looking at big law firms versus small law firms. And I want to read the question out specifically. Okay, so the question is, where a person starts off at a small firm, how likely are they ever to get work at a big 5 firm or even an international firm? And then the next question is, to what extent can one negatively be affected in their legal career if they do not start their articles at a well-known firm? Okay, again, Sanelisi, where you can go ahead.
Hi, Rory. Before you continue to the next question, I just wanted to add on the admission point, just that I feel that candidates need to make sure that when they start the articles, they make the application for admission as soon as they are eligible to do so. Because in the smaller law firms, what happens is that you register late and you end up spending more than 2 years at the firm. And that came into question in one of the interviews that I did, the question as to why I spent 3 years at the firm. And that's because my principal just took long to sign my papers. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight. That really helps. And it's not something I was aware of. So thank you for sharing that experience. And it also touches on another point that, you know, you need to take your admission into your own hands. And I'm happy that this point has been raised, because I was like a deer in headlights, because I was just going along with the flow. And luckily I was at a big firm where the stuff was structured and you had HR to help you. People would be like, go here. And I didn't understand what the big picture was. And I can understand why someone would ask this question. So I thank you so much for those insights. I think it's important to, as you say, you know, take charge and make sure that you understand the process. And it's a good thing you raised that point. I'm going to put it up in let me make a note actually. In this piece of content I'm putting up around admission. Do you see my notes, guys? Like, this is what happens in my notes. Can you see?
Yes, we can see.
Look, these children like literally write like, I'm like, this is my workbook. Now there's like chickens. So let me make a note on, so that I can put it up in the piece of content. So you must take charge of your admission and apply early, ne? Okay, cool. Okay, so in dealing with big law firms versus small law firms, again, I get this question a lot. So going into a small law firm is not a death sentence for your career, right? And the Legal Practice Council and LexisNexis issued a study last year on the legal profession and the number of legal professionals in the country, and big law firms or lawyers who work in big law firms. I think the stat was like, they're like 5% of the legal profession in South Africa. So they're very small. So the big law firms are a very small part of the legal fraternity in South Africa, but everyone wants to get into the big law firms because of the prestige, etc. So statistically, the chances that you are going to get into a big law firm are small, taking into account the number of the amount of lawyers in big law firms versus who are not, right? And that doesn't, I'm not discouraging everyone. Obviously, if you can get into a big law firm, that's great, whatever, because of the name, prestige, blah, blah, blah. But the thing with smaller law firms and medium-sized law firms is that firstly, you may actually get a better experience there from like practically being involved in matters, especially in litigation, right? So big law firms, you might be there for 5 years and never have seen the inside of a courtroom. You are just paper pushing, briefing advocates, preparing all the paperwork. Maybe if you're lucky, you might go to court and like sit behind the advocates and say nothing. But with smaller law firms, literally on day one, you could be going to argue a matter or postponing a matter at the magistrate court. You are a lot more hands-on in terms of like the instructions. You're more likely to see more action in smaller law firms, even with drafting and contract, because they don't have these big teams. If they get a big contract, then everyone will be involved and everyone will draft. So you need to think about the fact that you might actually have better practical experience at a smaller law firm or a medium-sized firm. And the second part of the answer to the question is that you can move from a smaller law firm to a bigger law firm, right? And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of lawyers who I've worked with, a lot of the directors who trained me started off at smaller law firms and then moved on. Like I got a lot of my banking and finance experience at Norton Rose Fulbright. And at that point, we had an amazing team of Black banking and finance lawyers, which was very rare back then in the market. And all of them had started at small law firms and then they found their way to bigger law firms. So your career is not stagnant. Your career will, progress and you can change. And some of those directors have moved now from the big law firms to smaller law firms. So there isn't a straightforward line. You can move between small firms and big firms if you want to, but I do want to emphasize the fact that you might actually get a better experience at a smaller firm as opposed to a bigger firm. So you shouldn't obsess so much about the big law firm name, but it doesn't mean that once you get admitted, you can't move to a big firm. A lot of people have done it because what happens is you have a big group of candidate attorneys coming into the law firms, probably like 30 or something at a time. But now since COVID, they've cut that number down. But over time, people leave for different reasons and there's a lot of attrition. And then they get to a point where they sort of need more junior attorneys who have been admitted to come in. And so there's always gaps. And you can also move from a small law firm into in-house at a bank, then from the bank move to a big law firm. So there's no straightforward way, but you can transition between all of those areas. And then another related question, even though the person who asked this question didn't ask that, was about the types of universities that you go to and whether that will prejudice you in getting into big law firms. And unfortunately, yes. So the big law firms are very biased. They will only generally take people from like UCT or Wits, maybe Rhodes, if you're lucky. I was lucky at Rhodes because I was interviewed by Tembeka at Rhodes because he started at the Legal Resources Center. So he did his articles at the Legal Resources Center in Grahamstown, but he ended up, getting articles at Bowman. So not articles coming in as an associate at Bowman. So you can do that transition. So I got interviewed at Rhodes because there was someone with an affiliation to Grahamstown or to Rhodes who forced people to go there. Unfortunately, yes, the law firms are prejudiced in terms of what universities they recruit from, which I don't think is correct, because you have brilliant people from other types of universities who could get into those universities. But again, it doesn't mean, I know a lot of people, for example, who work at the big law firms with degrees from UNISA. Not that I have anything against UNISA, but that's not the universities that the big firms would normally recruit from. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do think if you come from those other universities, then you have to have really good marks. So for example, someone can come from UCT with like 65s, but because they come from UCT and maybe they've done extra, they've got extra types of experience, they've, done VAC work programs, they were head of like the law society or whatever, then they will get into the big firm. So if you come from those other universities, unfortunately, you need to have better marks. Or what people sometimes do is they might struggle to get articles with sort of degrees from those other universities. And what they'll do is they'll then go do a master's at a UCT or Wits or Rhodes and then get articles through that. So there's different ways to skin that cat, but I just wanted to highlight, some of those dynamics and what happens with law firms and what their thinking is. Okay. Any thoughts on big law firms versus small law firms?
Well, just from my side, is just to echo your sentiments, Rory, that it's not a straight line. It's not linear. And this is from a personal anecdote. I did my articles at a small law firm, but during that time, I was doing my master's part-time in taxation. So I ended up at one of the major 4 accounting firms, global accounting firms. So yeah, it's just to echo your sentiment that you're quite right. The road isn't linear, but you can end up there. But also, I don't think it's all too wise to put so much reverence on big firms. It's what you're doing and how you're doing it that I think is more important.
100%. I totally agree with you. Thank you for sharing that insight. Building your brand. Now, this is my, Sanelisiwe, yes, you can go ahead.
No, I was just clapping.
Yay! So the next part, this is still the same person's questions. Hello? Hello? Oh, okay. So they asked, so the second part of the question was, to what extent can one negatively be affected in terms of their legal careers if they don't start articles at a big firm? And then they say, how can one truly build their personal brand in such instances without a strong law firm name to rely on? Working at a big law firm with a big brand can help you build your brand because you can piggyback on it. And I've done a Facebook, and I'm actually going to email the person directly my last Facebook, LinkedIn post on this, because I wrote a long thing about it. That what happens is a lot of people who work for the big law firms, right, will make the mistake of thinking that the brand of the big law firm is their brand, but it's not your brand. Because when you leave, you can't take the brand with you. And I've said this to you guys before. Then people do weird things like posting on LinkedIn, like ex-partner at Weber Wenzel. I'm like, what does that mean? You don't work there anymore. It's not your brand, right? So if you start off with the mindset that my law firm or my company's brand is not my brand, I need to work on my own brand. That is a very good starting point, right? And I know a lot of lawyers from small law firms or people who start their own law firms and then they go crazy on social media. They're always posting content and they build strong brands. So you can definitely build your own strong brand outside of the big law firms. And again, this might be an advantage of working for a smaller law firm because unfortunately, the big law firms have got branding policies, right? Especially the big international law firms. They will have a marketing team, a branding team that will dictate what their employees put on social media. And for me, the best way to build, let me just say this, the best way to build your brand is through social media, right? Because you can't put up an ad on TV or radio advertising that Rory Sang is an amazing lawyer and she's doing all of this stuff, because it's expensive, right? But there is attention on social media, right? And it's free, and you can put up your own ad in terms of advertising yourself or showing yourself as being a skilled lawyer who's an expert in all of that, and it's free. So for me, social media is like the only way essentially that you can build your brand as a lawyer. And in terms of the amount of time it takes versus, because the traditional way of building your brand is doing what, right? Is writing these long articles that are going to appear on De Rebus or becoming a published author. And first of all of those publications are read by other lawyers. And if you want to build a brand, right, you want other companies to see you, and because that it opens up employment opportunities outside of law firms, right? And if you are a lawyer and you want to build a practice, you want clients to see it, right? You are not building your expertise or your brand to be seen by other lawyers. Yes, maybe for promotion and getting job opportunities, but soon enough in your career, your focus is going to be on building a practice, right? So when you build your brand, you need to be thinking, yes, you might be building your brand for employment opportunities, but if you build your brand to building a client base and building a practice, then the employment opportunities will come. Because if you're then going and applying for jobs and saying, these are my clients who are going to follow me here, then it's an easy sell, right? And so building your brand is about building awareness about your skill set and your opportunity and you being a lawyer, so that corporates can see you, possible clients can see you, and not necessarily other lawyers. And the best way to do that is on social media. And posting content on social media. And I have done a branding thing for you guys, right? A session on building your brand as a lawyer.
Yes, you have, Rory.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to check whether that is online or not. I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel, because I know that some of the questions are from people who've joined like after I've given the training. So if that training is not online, I'm going to put it up online. So I'm not going to focus too much on building your brand. So you don't need to answer the question, you don't need to be working for a big law firm to build your brand. The fact that you're at a smaller law firm is like a slight disadvantage, but it's not consequential and it doesn't matter. And in any event, the big law firms are going to block what you can and cannot do, right? So, and I speak a lot, for example, with lawyers from Norton Rose Fulbright or some of the other international firms, and they're like, you know, the head office in London dictates what you can and cannot say. And a lot of the content is not South Africa, it's not contextual to South Africa. So they'll talk about, you know, IP and all of that, not IP, AI and blockchain technology and what's coming in the market and all of the stuff. And you'll see the lawyers, right? They will comment or post on a general law firm webinar coming up, and some guys from London are presenting it, and they'll be told, you know, everyone should post this on their LinkedIn or on their social media platforms, or some advert about some, you know, deal that was done by other parties, you know. So, and that's building the law firm's brand, right? So when you post something that's branded with the law firm, unless you are also like part of the forum, whatever, it's not really building your brand. And when you share content online and you're sharing content by other lawyers, yes, it's good to support other lawyers from your team or your law firm, but you're building their brand and you're not building your brand. So I don't think it's really that much of a disadvantage. If you're working for a small law firm, you can still build your brand around being a lawyer, around the stuff, you know, that you're passionate about. And that will also help you if you want to ultimately do the transition to a big firm. If you have a brand presence and people can, you know, see the stuff that you're doing online, it will be easier for you to have the transition. Mantabile, you can go. Mantibile, sorry.
Hi, Rory.
Hi.
Seeing you also come from a law firm, right? And it dictates what you can post, what you cannot post, and controversial. Can you say, like, do you feel like you were boxed? Like, for example, you can't post and be free on your social media and talk about other issues that are just controversial to the law firm. So I just wanted to know, did you feel like you were in a prison? Because at the same time, you wanted to build yourself independently. So do you feel that were you restricted? Thank you.
That's, again, such a great question. And yes, I did feel like I was restricted. That's why I don't have my employer on my LinkedIn profile. Like, people don't know. Like, when I was at this event yesterday, people are like, are you at APSA? I'm like, no, I work for Nedbank. Like, that's my full-time job. But when I was at APSA, I started to feel like people wanted to control what I could say. People already was getting emails. Have you read the policy on social media? And don't. And I'm not lambasting the firms, right? They need to control what people can and can't say on social media, because it's a reputational risk for them, right? So we don't want you to be saying anything controversial or whatever, because that's their policy, and that's what you signed up to. If you have a 9-to-5 and you're drawing a salary from people, they need to be able to control the narrative, and they don't want to be associated with things that they don't want to be associated with. And the solution for me was to just not put them on my social media. So I don't, on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see it just says senior legal advisor. It doesn't say where I work. It doesn't. But again, I understand that that's a privilege that comes with tons of experience and a strong brand, right? Not everyone can do that. So so I am aware that I only got to the point where I was able to do that once I built a strong enough brand, where associating my name with another big firm or big bank, is neither here nor there, because my previous experience, I have all of that brand association, and I'm at a point now where my brand is strong enough to stand on its own, and understand that not everyone is there. So you might have to toe the line for a bit longer if you sort of don't have a brand that is as strong, but you work for a bank or a corporate, and you can write under their name, because they will also give you opportunities, right, to publish stuff on their website. That also helps your brand. So you just need to, and if you have to, in advance say, this is sort of some of the content I want to post, speak to the relevant person within your organization to see whether it falls within it, or if they have restrictions to say, unless you do a webinar for us or with us, you can't post on social media, then do the webinar for them, or write something that's going to be posted in their publication, and then you can then move it over to like your LinkedIn and say, this is my name or whatever, and this is what I've done. So you can work within those parameters initially to start, because they are a bit restrictive. But once you build a strong enough brand, then you can stand on your own and not necessarily be confined as much.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. There was another question on recovering on mistakes. Don't continue making a mistake because it took you a long time to make it, right? So don't continue doing something that's not working for you because you think there's sunk costs, like I took so long to do this. Like, for example, if you know you hate law and you're like, oh gosh, I spent 5 years in varsity and 2 years of articles and 7 years of my life, I need to stick it out because I've spent so long, being a lawyer that I, can't let go of it doesn't make sense. I think you need to cut your losses. I think you learn from all of your mistakes. You should take all of your mistakes as learning opportunities. Don't beat yourself up too much about making a mistake and then just, continue from there. But I will reshare that longer piece of content around recovering from mistakes. So this is a question that I got around achieving your long-term goals. And this, the person who sent it to me, she says she was a practicing attorney for 14 years. She worked as a legal advisor. She restructured her dreams because first she wanted to be a director, then she wanted to be head of legal, then she wanted to be a legal executive. And she has, all of these milestones for her career. And she says, my retirement plan is to go to the bench and to serve on boards. And she also has a side hustle. But she says she has not been meeting any of those goals, and she's sort of feeling like she's stagnated. and she's asking for advice around, why is she not getting she's got the ambition, but she's not hitting these milestones that she's wanted. And, can I point in the right direction? And how does she dissect her plans into achievable goals? So when I read this this question, I was like, oh, girl, like you already like are going to the bench. I feel like, and she's like, by this time I'll do this, by this time I'll do that, and then retire at the bench and be a director. And it was a lot. And I feel like we put a lot of unnecessary pressure on ourselves, first of all, to hit these goals, especially like I come from a family where I was the first lawyer. Like my mom was the first person to go to varsity. Like both my grandparents on either sides were like garden boys and domestic workers. So when, you have these opportunities and your family is really not that educated, you put all of this pressure on yourself because, you want to prove and be a director and go in corporate and all of that. And it's tiring. Okay. So my first thing is, first of all, you need to breathe and take a step back to see why you want to achieve those things, right? Are you wanting to achieve those things because you enjoy the work you do? Or do you want to achieve those things as you want a gold star, right? You want to show off to your friends. You want to get that stuff so that you think it's going to make you rich and have the big car and fancy car so that you can show off to other people, right? So I know this is not the straightforward, this is what you do to achieve your goals answer. And it's taken me a long time to get there, because you need to do deeper work in terms of what are your values? What are the things that you value? Maybe we should also do a session on identifying what your core values are so that you can live a more purposeful life, right? So once you I actually think we need a session on values, because this is a very long question. Once you define, Hendrina, I see your hand up. I'm going to be with you just now. So once you define what your values are, then you can try and match your values to the work that you do, right? So if you want to achieve stuff because you think it's going to be fancy, or you want to make money from it, and you're extracting value and not giving value, you're not going to achieve your goals, right? If you're not passionate about what you do and it's something you enjoy, you're not going to achieve your goals. Because, for example, if you want to be this high-flying lawyer, right? Law is tough. You need to really be passionate about what you do and enjoy it. You're not going to put in the hours. You're not going to do the hard slog and the hard work if you don't enjoy it. So you first of all need to understand whether it's aligned with your values, whether it's something that you enjoy, so that you can put in the hours. I'm going to continue in this. Hendrina, you've got your hand up.
Thanks so much, Rory. I just wanted to also just share a bit of a personal experience on this based on what you said, matching your values. So when I started off in my career, I'm going to try and be short because of time.
No worries. I can go over, and if people need to hang up, that's fine, because I'm recording it and then I'm going to put it up on YouTube. But I think, yes, please share with us.
Yeah. So I also had this thing, big law firm vibes. And because I was also at one of the not so popular universities, which is Nelson Mandela University, formerly known as UPE, we were fortunate to have like CDH there for VAC work. I got into VAC work, but then I didn't get articles. So I was like, oh, okay. Then went into full-blown criminal law, which was legal aid, where I did that I enjoyed. And then I went into regulatory and compliance law, and I was in that for quite a bit. But then when I was past my 30 mark, and I did quite well in that, right? But when I got in my 30s, I'm 32 now, so this was last year. When I got there, I was like, okay, am I really a lawyer? And that speaks to your whole, that's why I said I would really love this matching your values thing. Then the question came about, and I really liked the lady who spoke on litigation and being so sure at such a young age what she wants to do. That was quite admirable. I was rather confused. And I was like, am I really a lawyer if I have not done hardcore drafting, ventured into M&As and all of these nice things that they speak about when it's like law and all of these things? And I then made the decision to apply within the company's legal department at a lower level to try and get the skill. And being a year in it, I'm now at a thing, okay, I could have accelerated my career with the experience I had because I literally started from scratch. But now I'm not so sure did I shoot myself in the foot in terms of age, because the return on investment in what I wanted is not exactly there. And I'm like, okay, will I be classified as a jack of all trades, master of none type of thing? Because now it's not like Rory is a finance lawyer and that's what she specializes in. And is that something I really need to harp on, or how can I use the experience that I've gained to kind of like be that master? I think that's the confusion I currently have in my career. So I thought this is just relevant in terms of achieving long-term goals and how that blends in.
Sure.
So I just thought I should share.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I really appreciate that. And I don't necessarily think that you should focus too much on specializing early. And again, this is a uniquely South African issue. This thing of saying by 30, I need to be a partner at a law firm specializing in one type of law, right? People take longer to figure out what they want to do than other people. Some people know early, some people know late. I know a partner, for example, at Bowman's who changed from being a partner in litigation to being a partner in tax at partner level, right? And they'd been partner for like 5 or 6 years. So it's never too late to change your career if you are not happy with where you are. And no experience is ever wasted, right? You might think now, oh no, I'm not necessarily getting the type of experience I want because I took the step back. And taking a step back is brave, right? And I think if you can take a step back to try and get different experience, you can, because I think ultimately it will aid in faster growth. Like, for example, I ended up in banking and finance. So first of all, you guys might not know this, but I only started banking and finance as a first year senior associate. So I got articles and then I practiced for 3 years in the tax department. I didn't have any corporate experience, and then I hated it. And then I was like, you know what, this is not for me. And then I tried to change. It was difficult, but I eventually did. So I also changed practice areas late into my career. And I thought all of my tax experience was wasted. And then when I transitioned to banking and finance, I ended up realizing that some of the stuff that we do relates to tax. And sometimes there'll be tax issues, and then I have to understand the tax issues. And then the other thing, like, you know, I've got my company and I rebranded or whatever, and I formed my bank account, and now I have to do like a tax return. And I was sitting at SARS, I'm like, guys, all my taxes, I never thought I would ever use tax. I hated it so much. But now when I'm like doing Mulawu and my business stuff on the side, my tax experience is coming in. I'm like, again, evidence of the fact that no amount of experience is wasted. And your career is going to be 30, 40 years, right? So you can't be like, oh, I spent a year doing this, it was a waste. It won't. Like, in the longer scheme of things, a year, you know, taking a side detour because you were trying to find yourself and you were trying to, you know, find alternative ways of practicing is not really something that is not beneficial. It is good that you should do that, right? I mean, I took a detour to go overseas, and again, I was a first year when I got there and I was pushing paper or whatever. Like, any amount of detour is good for you, and any amount of exploring is good for you. And what I want to emphasize is I don't want you guys to put this amount of pressure on you. Like the email I got, she's like, I want to retire. Like, my goal is to retire at the bench. I'm like, you don't need to put all of that pressure on you. And unfortunately, I think, and I know in most instances that pressure comes from trying to impress other people in terms of your achievements, as opposed to living your life and living your truth. And the other thing that helps me in my career is, and this is something that my mom drummed into me, give value, give more than you take, right? So even from high school, if I was not, like, for example, on the committee of a body, right? Like the dance committee, for example, I was always that girl who would be like, I didn't make it into the committee. I'm not one of the superstars, but literally I will rock up, and if we need to sweep the hall, like, I'm there. Like, I'm not, and people will be like, but you're not on the committee. But I'm like, but as a class, you know, we need to put the matric dance reception on. I'm not on the committee, but as the standard 9s, we're part of the body, and we all need to be. And like your teachers will say, standard 9s need to do the matric dance committee. They need to set up the matric dance, right? So I'm not necessarily like in a position of power where everyone's going to be seeing me, but I'm there to contribute, right? I'm like, whatever I can contribute, however little it is, I am. So I'm going to come and sweep. I am going to come and, yes, you have the people who are like the artists or whatever and are amazing at art and are painting the backdrops, but I'll come and wash the paint. I will come and set up, like I will. And then eventually that gets seen, right? And as you accelerate, your teachers will see that. And other people love having you. They'll always be like, oh no, we want Rory because she's the worker, right? And then you get that without necessarily being a superstar. So I've always grown up with that. And even during articles, you don't need to be seen to add value. And even on social media, right? So when you start your social media presence, don't go and bore people about all of your achievements and say, I'm a director at X, I'm a whatever, right? You need to be approaching social media to say, how can I add value? If I'm posting this bit of content, are people going to learn from it? Are people going to be inspired by it? Are people going to be entertained by it? Or am I just posting here to say, I am happy to share that I've been appointed as an executive or a director? That doesn't work. And generally in life, you will reap what you sow, right? So if you are constantly, and even within your job, right? If you're doing your job because you want to tick a box, and you come into your job because you never go for beyond, and you're always looking to extract as much value from your employer, right? You want to get the salary, you want to get the promotion, you want to, you know, appear on the cover of the whatever magazine, but you're not willing to put in the work, and the question you're asking yourself is, how much more can my employer give me, as opposed to how much more can I give my employer, right? So if they say bill 8 hours a day, are you billing 10 or 12? And there's this concept now of quiet quitting. Have you guys heard of quiet quitting?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't understand. Like, and for those who don't, quiet quitting is this concept that, you know, since the pandemic, people have become so jaded about employers. And now people are they're not quitting their jobs, right? But they're scaling back the amount of stuff that they do, right? So they will do the bare minimum. So if your company says, we're employing you 8 to 5, literally you log on at 5 to 8 and you log off at 5 to 5. And that's it. You're not doing more. You're not going far. You're not going beyond what your employer says, because employers don't care about us and they're always extracting value. But I'm like, then how are you going to grow? Like, how does quiet quitting benefit you? Like, I was not, and maybe this is how I was raised thing, but like my family and like the way I was taught is you always add value. You never just do the bare minimum. And instead of thinking, I'm not an executive by 30, I'm not a, you know, this person by this, you know, it's going to drive you crazy because you're not going to meet those goals. And life happens, right? And so you need to be flexible. Yes, it's great to be ambitious. I'm very ambitious. I want to be, you know, the superstar. I want to get this accolade. It's nice. And I will post about it if something nice happens. But that's not the core focus of the work that I do. I think your dreams and the stuff you want to achieve will come if the premise or your starting point is adding value, right? How can I add value? How can I go beyond the call of duty, right? How can I, if my employer is, and it's not just about your employer, it's about the people you work with, right? Are you collegial with your colleagues? Do you help someone out if they are not meeting their targets? Are you going to pull an all-nighter with your counterpart when they have a deadline and you don't, but you're there to help, right? Because it's all about relationships. It's all about networks, right? So you might think you're helping your colleague now with their deadline and you're staying up all night with them, whatever, and you're not going to get anything about it, right? And don't, when you help your colleagues, be that person. No, when you present it to your director, I want to be there because, you know, I helped you. No, right? Because you're adding value. You don't know if, and I like the saying that today's candidate attorney is tomorrow's general counsel, right? As people progress in your life, you don't know where the people you help are going to end up, right? And so if you want to, let's say, be a judge in 50 years, right? And you help some candidate attorney and they end up being at the legal practice council and they're interviewing you for, like, they'll interview you for your judgeship, you know. Collecting sort of those relationships is what is going to get you ahead in your career. Trying to add value as much as possible without expecting anything in return. Because there's a difference between helping someone, and because if you're always helping and you want something in return, you'll always be disappointed because people never give back as much. So if you give with an open heart and you're consistently adding value, I promise you, the world works in such a way that you're going to be rewarded for that. And so I want you guys to approach your careers in that way, to say, how much can I add? How much value can I add, as opposed to how much value can I extract? And building those relationships, and I've said this before, when you need a relationship, it's too late to build one, right? So you build the relationships now before you call on that person and say, I need your help with this. I need you to hire me for this position. I need you to refer me to someone. I need you to do something for me. You need to have built up that relationship. And you can't say, I had a coffee with someone, so I have a relationship with them, and next week I can call them and ask them for a job. No. If you're genuinely building relationships because you want to build connections, yes, you're building your network, then you're not going to call on that favor now. You might call on that favor in a year's time. You might call on that favor in 5 years. You might call on that favor in 10 years' time. That's why it's important to have a long-term view of your career. That's why it's important when you build relationships, you're not building relationships for now. And when you build a relationship, you're not building a relationship to extract value now. Whatever relationship you have, whether it's with your employer, whether it's a new contact, whether it's with your colleagues, whether it's with opposing counsel on alternative matters, you need to add value and you need to be collegial. And like, for example, if you're on a matter and you're litigating and you are working with opposing counsel, and you think short term, right? Like, I'm going to be as rude as possible. I'm going to stand firm and represent my client and, you know, be that person who's shouting during negotiations. First of all, you don't know where that opposing counsel is going to end up. You don't know if the opposing counsel you're rude to now on your matter is going to be the person interviewing you in 15 years' time at the legal practice council when you want to be a judge, right? And so whether someone is opposing counsel, whether someone is your colleague, whether someone is your employer, you always need to be thinking, how can I add value, right? Yes, I need to represent my client, but if opposing counsel makes a mistake, am I going to be blasting them on email and saying you're an idiot, right? Like for me, it's all about values, guys. And if you sit and you define what your values are, then your achieving your long-term goals is going to be easier, right? Because it's centered around your values. And just to go back to values, right? So values can be stuff like money, right? But is money at the top of your values list? Yes, we all want money. Money is nice, né? But money doesn't come when the aim is money. If your aim is, so for example, one of my values is giving back and mentorship. Like, I have done my values list. That's why, for example, I started this, this group, because I was like, I'm not living my values, right? And I don't have the opportunity to live those values through my work, right? And so I created a platform for myself to live values. If your values are family, for example, because as well, achieving your goals does not necessarily mean career goals, right? And it doesn't mean that your most important goals are your career goals. One of my goals has been to build a family, and it's on my list, right? So when I have to choose between getting a promotion and less time with my children, I know what my values are. My children are a value for me. That's why, for example, I left partnership. I was on the partnership track at Norton Rose Fulbright. I'd always wanted to have a family, and I had one child. And I sat down and I was like, yes, I can accept partnership, and partnership comes with what? Less time. Which goal is more important? Yes, I have career goals or money goals, but my most important goal is family. And once you know what your goals are, then it will be easier to make your career decisions, because those decisions need to align with what your values are. And yes, you know, there's the standard thing to say that your goals need to be SMART, right? It needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be, what does SMART stand for? Achievable. And then what does R stand for?
realistic, is it realistic?
Yes. So,
rational or something like that.
Yes. So you need to,
It is
you can have a schedule, right? And be like, this is so the question might be, I want to make partner by the time I'm 30. And then you can be like, write it down. What do you need to do? Write articles, build a brand, build a practice, and all of that. And I mean, I can share like how to set SMART goals. That stuff is easy. I can send you tons of articles on it.
So Rory, it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely.
And timing. Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to email you guys how to set SMART goals, right? And all of that. And you can do that work internally in terms of achieving your goal. But I think I do wanted to emphasize the fact that, you know, you need to take a step back and you need to, yes, you have those goals, but why do you have those goals? Do you really want to achieve those goals? Do you want to achieve those goals for your own personal growth, or do you want to achieve those goals because you might be insecure about who you are? You want to show people that you are successful. You want, you know, the new shiny toy. You want to show your friend, whoever who thought you couldn't make it, that you have made it. I think then that will help you in defining what your goals are. Yes, you can set your goals, but your goals also need to align with your values. And in achieving your goals, I want you guys to remember to just literally, if you take it, even if you don't do your SMART goals, hey, like just generally do like this is what I want to achieve. But the way to achieve it day by day is to just add value, add more value than you take out. And I promise, and build relationships. And I promise you everything else is going to fall into place. I know I spoke a lot, but I don't know whether you guys have any thoughts on that. What do you guys think?
Thank you, Rory. It was an eye-opener, very insightful and important session. Thank you.
Okay. Tabani, I know you had a question. It's 20
Yes, I do. And I don't think it's purely like legal and, but I mean, I just hope that you might, because this is like a mentorship session, I hope maybe you might have experience on negotiating salary.
That's a good one.
Best practices and what the things not to do. If you have any insights, I know this is
no, I think that's a good question.
HR.
No, it's not an HR. So first of all, I don't think that employers should be asking you for your payslip, because they will peg you where you are. So if you were underpaid for your previous job, then they're going to benchmark you and underpay you now. So I would first of all push back as much as possible on them getting your previous salary. And the way to respond to that when they ask you is to just ask them what their budget is for the role. Just say, you know, I'm not necessarily comfortable sharing my previous payslip, because I was hoping that, you know, the package that you put together for me is based on my level of experience, your requirements, and your budget for the role. And then keep quiet.
That's a good one. I didn't think about budget for the role.
Just because they have a budget. They know. They have a benchmark. Yeah. So if you were underpaid for your previous job, now it means that you're going to be underpaid for this one. Yeah. So the person who gives a number out first is already on the back foot.
Yeah.
Because then that is the starting negotiation point. You might be paid 10 Rand before, and then their budget is like 35 Rand. But they're like, this guy was paid 10 Rand. So even if our budget is 35, we're going to move it down to 20, and it's still double what he was earning.
Yeah.
So make sure that you, as much as possible, and they'll lie. No, for CIP processes, no. So try and push back as much as possible. I think for me, that's the most important thing. And then if they give you a number, then you must counter the number. I have undervalued myself my whole career, and it's still a work in progress. And my husband is like, me with your qualifications, I would be CEO of a company now. And I'm like, God, guys, we have
Technically, you are.
well, exactly. I like that comeback. Like you probably, so I've undervalued, and this is, and women particularly have an issue with this. We don't know our value. We underprice ourselves in the market, and we just give our information. So literally, I learned this thing about, and you don't have to give it to them. You literally don't have to give it to them. Your salary, because it's also under POPI, it's actually protected information. It's your personal information. Tell me, what does your previous salary have to do with them putting together a package for you now? The only reason they want that is because they want to benchmark you. And in most instances, for previous roles, you would have been underpaid.
Yeah.
So try not to give, and then whatever number they come up with, then you must counter. You can't accept the first offer that they give you. I'm telling you now, white boys don't do that.
That's true.
They don't. Literally, they
believe.
don't. So always counter, and then there's different negotiations, right? So it's not just the total cost to company. You need to read your contract and see how you can negotiate it, right? So read stuff like, what are their contributions to your pension? Are they contributing to group life? As opposed to looking at the total cost to company, see how that can be structured. And then ask them about other benefits. Do they have a car allowance? Are they going to contribute to either medical aid or give you extra contributions to your pension fund, right? And also flexibility is a big one for me at the moment. So I am willing to accept less money if I can continue working from home. Do you see? So, and actually, you actually shouldn't be earning less because you're going to end up doing more. Like I would, for example, work less hours, or have, like, we're not working on Fridays and then earn less, So you, again, going back to your values and what you want from a particular position. Obviously, everyone wants money, and then bonuses. So you can get a sense of, because sometimes, the banks might not pay you from an annual perspective, right? Law firms, especially at junior level, not when you're like a partner and you're making your own money. As a partner, how much you make is determined by how big your practice is. But generally, even up to non-salaried partners, you might find that the monthly amount that people in law firms make might be higher than the monthly amount that people in the banks make, but banks pay proper bonuses. So banks might pay you a bonus that is like your 6-month salary as a lump sum. So you need to take that into account. So when you're negotiating, yes, it's nice. This is my total cost to company. It's nice. And monthly, this is what I'm going to get. And look at what they're contributing to your medical aid. What are they contributing to your pension? But also ask them about bonuses and give you, and I know a bonus is not guaranteed, but especially with corporates. So if you're in a law firm, for example, your bonus negotiation is not as important because your salary might be higher. They might not even pay out bonuses. But if you're working for a corporate, you need to get a sense of, how much their bonuses are. And even during negotiations, be like, I know bonuses are not guaranteed. I know that they vary from year to year, but I need to just get a sense or the range of the bonus, because that will determine on how acceptable the monthly total cost, monthly salary that I get is. So think about the bonuses that the employer pays. And then also, once you get to sort of more senior roles, especially with the banks, you also get share options, right? So you look at how many shares in the company you're getting, because that all affects your salary package. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and then the other thing on salaries is, if you get to a point where there's no budging on the salary negotiation and you think you can get higher, what you can do is, once you start, or maybe actually while you're negotiating the salary, I don't know, I'm actually thinking whether it's best to have this conversation once you've started, or actually maybe do finish your salary negotiations. If you're not happy with the salary or whatever, then have the discussion with them to say, what would you expect from me in the first year? And what KPIs do I need to meet for me to get to this salary? So put it back to them, right? And say, okay, I can start at this level, but what do you need from me for me to earn that salary? And that's better than saying, I want. Now you're showing yourself that, you're showing that you're mature, you're here to add value, and use words like, how can I add value? Because then the employer will take you more serious and you're like, okay, I understand, I've negotiated enough. This is my starting point, but how can I add value to you and the business over the next year for me to be able to get to that salary? And what are my key performance metrics for me to meet? And they need to be tangible and they need to be written down. Then you know that you're working towards a year. Then when it comes to next year, your salary review, and you can show that I've met all the metrics. Can I get the salary, please? That's
the discussion with the direct reports, I'm assuming.
Yes, that is that's a discussion with the direct report.
So would it also be with HR, just to confirm it, or is just conversation?
It depends on how the company structures those conversations, right? So when you're starting out and you're negotiating the salary, it will be with HR. And I think maybe you might have the conversation with HR then and say, look, I'm not happy. I see we're not getting anywhere on the salary thing. They probably would have made some concessions and be like, okay, that's fine. I'm happy to accept the salary at this point. But once I get a sense of the role, I do want to have the discussion with the principal, and the principal might be involved in these discussions with HR at this point. But you can say to them, look, I'm going to come into the role. I think after 3 months, I want to do like a assessment to gauge where I am. And I want you guys to know that in a year's time, this is the salary that I want to be at. And I will be having the discussions with the principals about what my key performance areas are and how I can get there. So generally sort of alert HR that that's what your intention is, but don't go into so much depth because you won't know what the role means in any event. So what I would do is just highlight it and say, I'm not happy so much with the salary, but I understand that I will have to work and get myself to the salary that I want based on the value that I add to the company. Happy to sign the paper, start the job, but I want you guys to know that I will be having a discussion maybe in 3 or 6 months with my principal to understand what my key performance metrics are and how I can get to the salary in terms of the value that I bring. Oh, this is the goodbye screen. And then once you are within the company, then after 3 months or even 6 months, sit down with the principal. And you don't necessarily have to wait for your performance review at the end of the year, right? Again, this is about taking charge of your own career. If they want you to wait till then, but you can bring up the conversation with them. And when you bring up the conversation, it's not going to be a confrontational presentation, right? Because we're all adults here. And it's not going, again, I want to extract from the company. The conversation will be, how can I be of more value to you so that I can get to that salary?
100%. No, thank you so much, Rory.
Okay, that's it from my side. Any other questions, guys?
Nothing further from me.
Okay.
That last point was very important to me as well. Thank you for that question, Tabani.
Sure.
Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks again, Rory. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rory.
Thanks again, Rory and everyone. Bye.
Bye.